My name is Bernie Wolf. I wanted to talk today a little bit about my early impressions of the Camphill Academy, which in those days was called the Camphill Seminar, or the Seminar for Curative Education. And sometimes I think we expanded the name to the Seminar in Curative Education and Community Living. Now this goes back to a far distant time. I first came to Beaver Run in 1969 as a college intern, and I was allowed to join the first year of the seminar at that time, which was already in the second of its 3 trimesters. That time, of course, is a special time because outside of Beaver Run and all around it and spreading around particularly the western part of the world was a counterculture, was a new attempt of young people to find new ways of living, communal ways of living, ways of sharing, to find ways of perceiving and understanding the world, breaking through the materialistic borders and barriers to real knowledge. There was, of course, what was known as the hippie culture, a big back to nature movement, out of which grew also then the whole food movement and the ecological movement and so on and so forth. It was a special time, and many young people like myself were seeking. I was 19 years of age when I first came to Beaver Run. And Beaver Run at that time was much more secluded and isolated from the general world. It was really a self-contained, intentional community. And every minute of the day was embedded with life with the children, creating a culture and living together. And into this, I was allowed to join the Camphill Seminar. I was already searching in myself for answers. I already had a notion that one's experience was limited by the senses which one had, and that there might be beings, and I could see them in nature, who had different kinds of senses, and therefore perceived the world in a very different way. I pondered what was the experience of the insect that flew or crawled or swam in the water. I pondered what kind of consciousness a tree had when I could sit at its base under its big sheltering arms. And when I came to Beaver Run then, I suddenly saw there was a group of people and a body of knowledge that had answers to those questions. And I was allowed, as a 19-year-old, to participate in that. The, now as we call them, academy courses, were similarly embedded in the week. We had a whole day for our studies. It was the people who presented them were then my seniors and mentors. There's very few of them who are alive today, but a few in their 80s and even 90s are still there, and also are still active in sharing their experiences and their knowledge out of curative education and anthroposophy. These people were very authentic. They were not necessarily out of college, some were. They were not necessarily having degrees and credentials, but they were very authentic. They had studied and lived anthroposophy for quite a few years and were very, very articulate and very, very heartfelt and very filled with what they had to say. Many of them had actually been students under Karl Koenig, and so there was a passing over of their experiences from studying and working in curative education with Karl Koenig to the next generation coming up. I only stayed for the first time for 3 months, so I took part in the second trimester. I came back in the fall and was allowed to take place in the first trimester of the following first year. And then I left for several years to finish my college education, including a year at Emerson College. And I came back then in 1972 in time for the third trimester of the first year. So I came 3 times, and I did the seminar in that sequence, second trimester, first trimester, and then when I rejoined in 72, I finished it to the end. In those days, it was only a 3-year course, but again, totally embedded in the practical life experience, in the cultural life, in the talk, in the house meetings, in the talks around the dinner table, and so on. One really was swimming in a world of anthroposophy and community living. The idea of a completion project was first dawning, and we were told very gently that we could take on a third-year project. There was a third-year project then. It was optional, and it was suggested that we take on, to further deepen our study of the biography of one of our children, in order to at least begin to get a feeling for their karmic situation and the destiny that they brought in to this, their very special life as a special needs child. And I had chosen a child, and I had begun to learn more about his early childhood, and I even had arranged with his parents to come for a visit on spring break and spend time with them and visit the places that he went to as a child and continued to go to when he came home. But life didn't work out for me like that. I got married instead. And that was allowed in place of my third-year project. So I still got my academy certificate. I still have a handwritten certificate somewhere in a drawer, and was able to complete the academy and then continue with my path of life and work and study here in the Camphill community at Beaver Run. Some of the highlights were that I came back for the first year in the fall of '69. We were already, of course, approaching the Michaelmas time, and one of our teachers and house parents, Adola McWilliam, was in charge of taking this unruly group of first-year students and guiding them into a fairy tale, to enact a fairy tale in honor of Michaelmas. Later, I think it was in my second year, the second-year group took on, actually, to produce a play for the St. Martin's Festival. And we studied his life, and we wrote a script, and we pulled all the costumes and everything together, and we did a kind of wonderful viewing of the life of St. Martin. It was a wonderful community-building experience amongst those in our seminar group. What else can I say by way of those early days? I remember in one of the years we had our supper together in the chantry dining room and kitchen, and our most esteemed Janet McGavin came, and I think she would just tell us things or would read to us, or we would read to her portions of Rudolf Steiner's Esoteric Science, which was, of course, the cosmic history of the universe from the point of view of the spiritual beings who created it. And it was always a mind bender. But again, Janet did it with such deep veneration and such deep penetration. It was always a very special treat and a travel into spiritual knowledge. We had visiting doctors in that time who came from other Camphill places in Europe, conducted the child studies and the college meetings, and we learned a tremendous amount about the children who were in our care. It was during those years that I met many of the founders of Camphill and many of the ones who had come then soon after the founding. And it was really a special time to connect with the origins, because as I say, we were only one step away. Even though I never met Karl Koenig, I met many of the people who had studied under him, many of the people who had come with him initially to Scotland in the wartime, and so on and so forth. So this whole experience was a life changer, and really I fashioned my life really on the foundation of that Camphill seminar, that Camphill Academy. But I was very lucky that I had, as a further foundation, a whole year of foundation studies at Emerson College in England, which at that time was really the only English-speaking center for adult anthroposophical studies. So I had a whole year immersion there within my first year of academy, as I described it to you. And I also met some people there who I'm still connected with in Camphill life and work and anthroposophical studies. So I say it formed my life because I never left Beaver Run. 53 years later, I'm still here. And although I cannot contribute much to the everyday life, I still feel I have something to give and continue to be a teacher in the Camphill Academy, and hopefully an example of someone who had the endurance to stick it out for 50 years. I hope that gives you a glimpse into what the Camphill Academy was and what its meaning can be and how it can continue to thrive and inspire young people, people of all ages who are looking for something that they cannot find in the everyday culture and sciences and studies elsewhere in universities and online and wherever you look. There's something very different, very unique, and very enriching that can be found here.